And welcome to this Thursday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForrest, joined immediately here at the outset by the great Mike Jones, who is with us every Monday and Thursday and is fired up once again. Mike and I managed to get buried in that Masters pool, but we're going to try and help you bury your bookie with some selections later on in the program. In the meantime, though, and I was talking about this earlier this morning on another show, Mike Jones. I still remember there's a story associated with a racehorse whose name will always be indelibly impressed in my mind because I think about this from a life and a living situation. Time for a change. Where I'm sure you've thought this many times in your life. Hey, Mike Jones, it's time for a change. And I remember this horse running at Hialeah Park, and it's one of those weird things where you can't remember what you had for breakfast, but I can remember where I was on March 7th, 1984. I was at Hialeah Park, and Time for a Change was running against this horse that everybody thought, every future book, every racing selector, handicapper, Andy Byer, they're all over this horse called Devil's Bag, was trained by Woody Stevens. And he's running in the Flamingo Stakes, which was one of the big prep races for the Kentucky Derby at Hialeah Park when it was really like just a tremendous place to go and enjoy thoroughbred racing in the season here in South Florida. Great weather, babes everywhere, a great Gatsby type of scene there. And Devil's Bag gets blown away in the Flamingo Stakes that year, ends up fourth. There was some speculation there was something wrong with the horse, but the guy in the booth next to me in the very suspectly constructed Hialeah press box, which I think they built this thing in like the 1890s, and it had not been resurfaced or renovated ever since, right? So you're thinking if a guy has gained a couple of pounds even from one day to the next, there's a chance this building collapses. And sure enough, they had Time for a Change nailed in an exacta with a horse called Dr. Carter. I'll never forget this. And you're yelling and screaming, "Time for a change, Dr. Carter! Time for a change, Dr. Carter!" And while this is happening, I'm watching this guy's cigar ashes kind of dropping towards the floor. And it turns out that while they were jumping up and down and cheering, the Devil's Bag was beaten at 3-5, and this exacta was going to be fat. And they had sent it in on it. They had also ignited a fire in the trash can,
That's
in the
wild.
waste paper basket. And so I'm seeing like these wafts of smoke going up as I'm looking over at these two guys celebrating and thinking, if somebody doesn't throw like a sports jacket over that waste paper basket, this whole thing is going up in flames.
Oh my God.
So I'll never forget that. But Time for a Change, it was applicable to what happened in the NBA because no 10th seed has ever made it into the actual field of the 8 that will go into the best of 7 series to start the NBA playoffs. And yet, you are looking at your Miami Heat.
Mm-hmm.
So we both hail from South Florida, and you're thinking they loom as a danger to maybe break that trend, that it's time for a change there.
Why not? I see the numbers of Pick'em, so it's telling you that the odds makers feel the same.
Wow.
You don't see an 8 and a 10 that go out there on the road be a Pick'em, so you kind of think. I kind of like what I saw last night. Very impressive. Jump right from Jump Street, knocking down threes. Tyler Hero's getting where he wants to go. Bam's doing what he wants, and you just keep forgetting that the Heat, this nucleus, has made the finals and has made playoff runs in the last 3 or 4 years. On 2 occasions. Yeah, they're missing Jimmy Butler, or so be it. But, there's still a lot of good players there. And now you got a team that's really kind of an upstart, plays well, a lot of talent, younger. Yeah, he came out and showed him against my ability. I liked Chicago, but I was right away, you could see that something was happening there. And, the halftime line was 7, and you could have taken your chances, and you cover by, you cover by 4 or whatever, 5. You had a small cover in the second half, but
Yeah.
man, the Heat looked impressive last night. Both ends of the floor too. And here's one of those things, Jeff. Not to interrupt, but
Okay.
you start off a second half, you put up 71, and you get on the second half, and all of a sudden, you score 8 points in the first 7 or 8 minutes of the quarter. But yet you still got a 13, 14-point lead because your defense is playing. So when the front end doesn't work, you do it on the back end. And that's what Heat coaching, and that's the kind of atmosphere of the Heat culture. You overplayed, lyrics of Heat culture. But there was something to say about their defensive commitment there in the third quarter when things weren't going right offensively.
You think Joe Cronin of the Portland Trailblazers, a team that you jumped on their backs about maybe a little over the halfway point of the season. And you
Mhm.
made a lot of scores there and a lot of good recommendations here on the show.
Right.
But you had to think that Tyler Hero was the first name that
Sure.
what was thrown out there in any deal, a potential deal, when the Heat were
Yeah.
coveting the services of Damian Lillard, and
Mhm.
also when supposedly they were looking into Kevin Durant. But
Mhm.
Hero has distinguished himself. He's maybe not a guy that you want to have as your number one star. He was that last night with 38 points. And then, the other thing that I was looking at in that game early on, especially when essentially the game was lost, the Heat have had a tendency, a penchant for collapsing in the fourth quarter. They
Yeah.
did, you said, that little bit of slide in the third, bounced back
Mhm.
nicely from that. But I mean, look, you've had coaches, Red Holzman, Red Auerbach, but Billy Donovan went to the Red Sea defense, I
Yeah.
believe. Early stages of the first quarter, Hero was 6 for 6. I believe he went 8 for 8 his first 8 shots.
Yeah.
He hit them all in the first half, and then before a miss. But he's waltzing through the paint there as if he
Yeah.
was involved in a layup drill.
Yeah.
I was shocked that they didn't,
Yeah.
out of a timeout, at least get somebody to try and draw a charge or get in his way or defend a
Yeah.
little tighter on those
Yeah.
layup drives by Tyler Hero.
Yeah. Little different. Maybe Billy's working on his Hall of Fame speech in the midst of the
I
first out or something.
mean,
But
where was the toughness there? That was a
yeah,
joke.
yeah. I mean, you kind of it's a different way they play today. They're worried about the 3-point line. They're worried about the screen roll, and all of a sudden, someone gets crossed up on what they should be doing on a help recover or a switch, and next thing you know, a guy gets right to the basket. But when you see it 3 or 4 times in 5 possessions, it kind of makes you think what's really going on out there.
Yeah.
But then I saw Vucevic look at Buzelis one time with Giddey and say, "What's going on here?" So you kind of think, but it's just the game is a different game today. It's all based on a three. How many times did Kobe White have a 15-footer open, and then all of a sudden, bam, he gets switch on out of body. You could look at it 3 or 4 times. I noticed it, and instead of taking an open 15-footer, he dribbles backwards,
Yes.
and now he's looking to take a three. But then you see Bam make a push toward him, and now he doesn't. The shot's not there. So they're willing to give him a mid-range two, but not the 3-point line. So I think it's really kind of different the way they play, and the kids look for that shot. I mean, there was a couple times, in that game where they had a layup and they were looking for a three.
Yeah.
And that's the way the game is played now, and it's a little different when we were thinking about it a long time ago.
Unfortunately, too, when you're ice
Yeah,
cold from 3-point range,
that's right.
today's game of basketball. Now the college three, there's no excuse for not hitting a high percentage. That
Right.
to guys like you and me playing back in the day, if they had the 3-point strike,
Mhm.
we would average 30 a game. But
Right.
at that level, but in the NBA level, anything outside of the corners there is a bit of a heave.
Right.
And to think that that's become where the whole game is
Yeah.
determined is at a spot on the court 25 feet from the basket.
I'll go back to a conversation I had with Doug Kazarian in Las Vegas. I started arguing with him about the game and where it's going. He said, "This is where it's going." He said, "If you could shoot 40% from three, it's equal 60% from two." And I'm like trying to go through the math. And he
Yeah.
looks at me as a Brown grad and I'm a dummy. He looks at me and he's like, "Well, look, think of the logic." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I get it." And then you started seeing it. And Steph Curry has what he's meant to the game. You cannot question. I think he's an unbelievable player. Watch him the other night, still doing things that amaze me. But he's created this step back jump shot, which I don't know that half the people can do this. And one thing that I see on my 11-year-old grandson is he likes to step back to shoot a line and the ball doesn't hit the rim. And you're like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, that's the shot. Step back."
Remember, you used to put the little X on the board there with
That's right.
masking tape where you were directing
Right.
people to bank a layup.
Yep.
You don't
And
see
so
that.
that to me has always been something that I think, as much as he's been great for the game, he's created all this long distance shooting. But then again, I look at some of these teams, and it's consistent on 8 or 9 guys that can shoot that shot. Where
Yeah.
if you go back and watch the '86 Celtics, which I've been fond of this, Max's the Celtics city. You watch the old basketball, and there's something to be said about Bird taking an 18-footer, but they didn't shoot the three like that, like we are today. So I guess it's the work ethic and all that stuff. The great players shot it well, but the whole nucleus of your team able to shoot it is crazy. Bam even made a couple last night, I think.
Yeah.
So it's the way the game is playing, and this is what they practice on as hard as all these guys work. So just get used to it and enjoy it.
All right, the other game in the play-in 9 versus 10 that took place last night, Dallas Mavericks, and they end up beating Sacramento handily also, similar blowout. So that was the team getting points.
Mm-hmm.
They were getting, I think, 4.5 in that ball game. They win it outright by 14.
Mhm.
And the consequence, though, the general manager was let
Yeah.
go after
Yes.
the ball game as the
Mhm.
Kings fired their general manager, Monty McNair. They'd already fired their coach earlier in the season.
Right.
So
Yep.
you would have to say, I don't know. I mean, trading De'Aaron Fox, the guy wanted out of there and probably wasn't coming back.
Right.
Not sure he was in a particularly strong position there, but interesting that you're in the playing game and you don't even get a chance to go back and clean out your office, and they've already told you, hey, your services are no longer necessary. So
Yeah.
consequences of losing in that spot. Does Dallas have any chance to go on the road and beat the Memphis Grizzlies, who, by all rights, were right there knocking on the door of getting out of the first round early or into the first round when they had Golden State in a position where they could have easily won the game?
So when you're watching Dallas play over the last month, you saw games when Davis didn't play and all. When those guys were playing, they were very well, good against the number. Were a factor. Last Sunday I was interested in that game that they played. Memphis ends up, Dallas. You think is going to come in there and play and try to do something and stir anything. And then sure enough, Memphis blows them out. And you're thinking the same thing. The problem they have is how they stop Morant, but he turned an ankle the other night that looked a little questionable in the third quarter when he came back and he was limping around. So got to keep an eye on the injury report to turn the ankle, but why not take Dallas? I think they're going to have a little bit more challenge inside than I think Sacramento gave them. I just think Valanciunas plays a little bit more on the perimeter. Sabonis is a great player, but I don't know if he's a defensive factor. But Davis is going to go up with a little height against Edey, but should be able to pull him away from the basket. Jarrett Jackson's a tremendous player, but they don't have the guards that they have, and the Morant. There's no one that really stops him if his ankle's right. Line 6.5, very high line for me, probably off the blowout. I'm going Dallas again. I'm going to
Wow.
go with the 10 seeds and go
You
take
and the
take
thoughts.
take the points. Yeah, I mean, I just like the experience. I like AD. I like that there's might be a little itch there to see how far they could do this without Luke. I think if they go up against OKC, I think OKC will have kind of a bone to pick there because that's who eliminated him last year, Dallas, I believe. And it's just I don't think any of these teams are getting past Oklahoma City in the first round, but it should be an interesting game. I like the 6.5.
All right. All of that is on tap tomorrow. The two playing games to determine the final two spots that are going into the NBA postseason. I love this about you. You're betting hockey. You're betting late regular season NHL games, and trying to determine which team has. I mean, if you've already all of the playoff spots are already clinched.
Yes.
We know what the matchup.
After last night, Montreal wins.
Yes.
Game against that. Everybody I talked to the hockey guys I talked to around Montreal. I kind of liked Detroit last night a little bit. Devils on a back-to-back, getting ready for the playoffs. Detroit made their run. They have some players. I thought they would win. They win 5-2. It didn't work with the Knights. The Knights played a few people, had a down 1-0, win 4-1. So you go back and forth with these kind of games. But hockey starts. This is the best time of year for hockey. This toughest run in sports, got to go get 16 wins to get the cup, probably the most cherished trophy, I think, among the players. You want the Lombardi, but it's really the name. The cup is the cup. The
But
players
they
bring
don't do
it down.
anything with the Lombardi Trophy. I mean,
Right, yeah, but the
Lombardi
players,
Trophy?
each player gets to spend time with it. Yeah.
This thing's been in the Atlantic Ocean. It was at the Elbow Room. The Panthers out of South Florida win the cup. It
Yeah,
was in two of my friends' restaurants where they filled the cup. One with bolognese,
yeah,
pasta bolognese, and the other went with like shrimp. No, it's stone crabs. I think they had in the thing.
right.
It was fantastic. No other trophy is so celebrated, and I don't think any trophy. I mean, extracts more blood and determination in terms of having a ability
Yeah,
to go ahead and hoist it. That's why it
yeah,
is. I would think. I mean, of all the celebrations, you look at the Stanley Cup and you see what it takes to get there. It's amazing. But even a first round series, you could be the best team in hockey, like Winnipeg was, so winning the President's Trophy, often a bad omen for winning the Stanley
yeah,
Cup. And they draw a St. Louis Blues team in the first round
yeah,
in 1-8 that
yep.
it just had a 12-game winning streak snapped towards the end
Yeah,
of the regular season.
that's
So,
right. They win 12 games. Their goalie was the starting goalie for the Canadian team that played in that the four-way Olympic All-Star Cup, which was
oh yeah,
fantastic.
Four Nations, I
Right?
think.
Yeah, Four Nations. I'm sorry. Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, This is the 8 versus 1 can happen. We saw Columbus beats
Yeah.
Tampa. We get Bobowski off that Columbus beating Tampa when he was out of his mind, when Tampa was the one them had the most points. It's just, to me, this is the really, really fun time. And down in South Florida over last year's win and getting to the finals prior, in the year of the rat when I was around there in '96, I think it was just so much fun, and it's great. It's just a great time of the year. So I'm looking forward to the hockey playoffs for sure.
Yeah, and the matchups are not easy. You mentioned the Panthers.
Yep.
They take on the aforementioned Lightning, who I remember got
Yep.
swept, I believe, to the stunned disbelief of the Tampa crowds.
Yes.
Columbus, I think, took them out in 4 games in the first round. I
Yep.
happened to be doing some work at some radio station up in Tampa at the time, just very briefly. I was operating out of their studios.
Yeah.
I remember just seeing the look on the faces. They had that casino face that you're familiar with, where you not only lost your ass while you were in there, but then on top of that, you visited the American Thoroughbred machine, the old ATM, and depleted your bank accounts to the point where your checks were going to start to bounce on your bills or your payments, and you have that face as you go to your car, just hoping maybe somebody put a bomb in there so you can end it all.
Yeah.
And that was how it was around Tampa, Florida, when the Lightning, with the best record during the regular season, got bounced in 4. So, and a hot goaltender can determine a lot. But that's one matchup. Dallas and Colorado. Dallas, I didn't realize this. They're favored to win the Stanley Cup at like 6-1.
Yes. Yeah, made the deals
Based
before
on
they.
what, Mike Jones? I haven't really been following the Dallas Stars this year. I used to like him when Hitchcock was the coach.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is he back there? This guy?
No,
'Cause
but they
actually
they've
determined.
struggled. They've struggled recently. I think they're on a losing streak going into the playoffs. I mean, but it's these teams. This is what they're gearing up for. I remember. I remember being in Vegas. I think it was last year, 2 years ago, or maybe it was last year, when in Dallas. I'm sitting at the bar and the Stars whole team. Who are these guys walking in? All like 6'2", 6'3", lean, in great shape, stern faces. No one saying hello. I say, hey, what's up? They don't look at you. Someone says, that's the Dallas Stars. They're in here to play the Knights. And I was like, oh my God, look at all these guys. I said the next night, I said, boy, I wouldn't bet against them. They just look like they were ready to go. And that's hockey. The focus, they stay together as a team. They go out as a team. This is a great time if you're a hockey fan. Live hockey, NHL, I think is unquestionably the most. NHL playoffs is the most fun event to be at. So we had our run last year, and I hope we're not distracted. I'd like to see Panthers go far. I hope they get by this first series. I think the Capitals and Hurricanes both win. Out west, I think St. Louis will give Winnipeg all they want. The goalies probably be the difference, because there's the same goalie matchup that was in the nation's final. The 2 goalies kind of looked at that. And I think Edmonton probably gets by. The Kings got their number, and I think Edmonton might make a run and get out of the West. I think the fire lit under them, and I think it should be an interesting playoffs.
If you were pressing your bets, I mean, Edmonton, I believe, was a preseason favorite to win the Stanley Cup. And they have to be pretty long odds right now, because I tracked it like the top 4 teams. It went down to 12-1. I think you had Washington maybe at like 12-1, something like that. The team that was dynamite all year long with the Ovechkin chase. So because he was chasing Gretzky, you didn't realize how well the team was playing.
Right. Yeah.
They had a great season. Interesting. You can get a pretty good price on anybody, but Dallas and the Panthers, I think, were both. One was 6-1, the other 6.5.
Yeah.
And then everything after that was 10-1 or more.
And those are the favorites, 6-1.
Yeah, I believe so.
Very interesting. So now let's look at the comparison. Go to the NBA, and I think they're 2-1s on OKC and Boston.
Yes.
So why would you get I guess the dominance is what the bookmaker sees. Price maker says you might get a longer shot. They want to spread it around.
You have a more random nature to the sport, also.
Yes.
And so, I mean, in the NBA, look, injuries to star players. Maybe you can better compensate for that in hockey than you can in the NBA if you lose one of your primary guys, because it seems like some of the parts are interchangeable, no matter how. I mean, you lose Kachuk or whatever if you're the Florida Panthers or any of the star players on any of the other teams.
Yeah.
Sure, that's going to hurt. But in the NBA, the number one guy goes down. Whoosh, it's
and you're playing 18 full guys, mostly the same amount of minutes, roughly, in hockey. Where basketball, you get 5 guys playing most of it and 4 guys coming off the bench. in basketball. So you got a lot less players that play. So a big injury in a basketball would obviously hurt, but there's a lot to it. But yeah, so we're looking forward to the weekend and get the start of the playoffs coming.
All right, let's make some money for the people out there, Mike Jones.
Okay.
I know you.
Yep.
You've been, on top of your game lately, and you've been using a wide variety, a veritable buffet of betting.
Yeah, spread it around different sports. Try to find your edge and all that, and try to go that direction. I'm going to go up to the early game here, 12:35. Williams against Heaney. Heaney has struggled in the past, had a little run, was pitched better, but I think I like the Nationals. I'm going to take a dog. We're going to try to find dogs for cash as we emphasize on our on our Instagram posting. So I'm going to do one little baseball game today, the 12:35 starting, go on the Nationals.
Nationals on top. All right. Anything else strike your fancy?
Yeah, we're gonna go do. I think the Panthers get everything done. I think they're embarrassed after the 5-1 game. We're gonna go for game one, Florida, steal one in Tampa, and start putting a little crink in that series. And in the basketball, I'm going to take both dogs Friday night. So I'm going to give 4 plays out here. Well, the road teams. I'm going with the Heat, and I'm going with the Mavericks. I'm hoping the Mavericks win the game, but I think they cover. The 6.5, I think, is too much. And with the Heat, I think they do win as a pick 'em at Atlanta, become the first team at least to be a 10 seed to get into the first round. And then we got the Celtics thinking again. Cleveland will be thinking, do they really want to see this? They had Chicago's number, maybe hoping there, but I don't know what the series is like with Atlanta, but I know that they don't want to see the Heat. Just a veteran-tested, playoff-tested, coach-tested team in the first round when you haven't really done anything, as far as the playoffs go in Cleveland without LeBron. So it's going to be an interesting little matchup if the Heat get in there. Maybe they can test them.
It's possible. I wouldn't discount that. Certainly, I looked apart last night, and Atlanta looked awful in their opening game.
Yeah, that was interesting. That was an interesting game because Orlando gets out, hit some shots. I thought it was going to be closer. Atlanta gets out, hit some shots, and then all of a sudden, you get a nice little second half bet, right? You get the 1. You lay 1 with Atlanta, down 14 at the half. They get it down to 3 minutes to go. Oh, you're looking good. You lose by 25. And Trae Young gets thrown out with 4.5 minutes to go. So much for that little fun play you put up there, thinking that the team's going to come back, in a small line game, in a game that means anything. But the problem with that 7-8 game, the 7-8 game, is they have a fallback game. Last night they didn't, but it's very interesting to see the road team get out to a big lead and hold on, something that hasn't really happened most of the time in the league in the season. But when you look back at it, you say, well, who are the 2 tested teams on the road, Miami and Dallas? They come in there, play more playoff tested, you would think, than Sacramento and Chicago, and therefore the experience wins. So you might want to look at maybe a little more experience too in this game too, a little momentum after a win. Both the home teams coming off a loss. Feel a little better about yourself, you go out there and maybe you pull it off. Because I think you're right to say 10 seeds don't come in, but these are different type of 10 seeds out of these 4 teams. You can make arguments that the Heat and Dallas, without the trade and disruption with injury, and the Heat going with what they've been through, have probably been the better teams consistently in the last 5 years. So this is the year maybe the 10 seed gets in there, both of them.
I'm thinking you're right. It's time for a change. All right, Big Gunner podcast coming up Tuesday, 10
Big Gunner podcast Tuesday, 10 o'clock. I'm pushing for the Giants to trade out and maybe try to get an extra player, maybe gear for, because they have the quarterback position kind of settled a little bit. We're going to draft one for sure, but I think we have it settled with Russell Wilson, Jameis. Maybe line up that, you're going to do something for the future of the team and maybe have another first-round pick if you trade out next year. Maybe make a move if you still need a quarterback. The big talk is, are they going to go for Shedeur Sanders? They went back into Colorado again, or had more conversations and talks and workouts with Sanders. Mike Tannenbaum said that's usually it means there's no conviction on how good he is. Maybe people want him, maybe people don't want him in the organization, so they want to get one last look. I don't know what's going on, but I can tell you, listen to Joe Schoen, he doesn't think the quarterback's going to be at 3. I'm a Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter guy at this point, thinking that get these pieces, get these great players, best player available when you're still trying to move up. And again, just try to stay healthy. But it should be an interesting week. And we'll have a little bit going in, and Thursday's the draft, and we'll figure it all out next weekend.
All right. Hit him straight. Mike Jones, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us on Bury Your Bookie.
Hey.
Mike Jones. All right. That's going to do it. Hopefully you guys will connect Did a little bit of a burial job yesterday. Unfortunately, wrong about the two basketball games, and one of the baseball games that we got from Troy West went down. But he did hit. He's strong on that under on the Seattle Mariners game. So take a look at that. Mike, we'll see you next time. And everybody, thanks so much for tuning in to today's edition of Bury Your Bookie.